You're thinking about retiring to Mexico because your retirement is coming up soon, or you've already retired and you want to move there because it's getting too expensive in the States or Canada or Europe or wherever you are. This video is for you. This is part 2 of retiring to Mexico. This is the thumbnail for part 1. Now, I'll tell you what you would have missed if you didn't see part 1. Part 1 was about a few things about Mexico, retiring there for the country, safety, what's safe, what's not, and that kind of stuff. And a huge amount of part about the healthcare system, how to use it, what it costs, what do you get, and that is like super detailed. Even more detailed in part 1 was the visa system. Everything you'd ever want to know about the visa system for a temporary visa legally to live in Mexico, or the permanente, which is the lifetime one. Man, it was in video number 1. This is video number 2, and we'll be going through a lot of other areas, like pets, importing pets, and what actually a pet is, because there's a different designation of pets in Mexico than what you think it is. And also, along with pets, there's importing a car or not importing a car. You can actually use your own car. Tricky, but you'll learn how to do that. And a whole bunch of other things that, again, you'd want to know about retiring to a new country. In this instance, specifically Mexico. So this is part 2. If you have not seen part 1, highly suggest you watch part 1 because there's a lot of gold in that one. So this is part 2 of our interview, and we'll just get right in it. The interview is with Mariana Lang, and she is the principal. She runs MexicoRelocationGuide.com. That's where you get the guide, and in the guide is all of this type of information and more. And and she's given us a discount for you, if you, or us too, really anybody, if you want to use the code, which is Laptop Seniors, easy to remember. So you would put in Laptop Seniors and you get 10% off the guide. I think after you watch this, you're going to be like, yeah, I think I might want that, have that guide if you're thinking about retiring to Mexico. So let's go right back into the interview. No more intro. That's pretty much it. Let's just go to it now.
What's involved in driving across the border? I mean, are there permits required for bringing a vehicle in? Because I know there's a fee if you're actually immigrating to Mexico and bringing a vehicle in, right?
All foreign plated vehicles are required to pay a fee. It's called a temporary import permit, or TIP. It's a deposit that you pay, and it depends on the age of your vehicle, anywhere from $350 to $550, and unless you plan to stay in the free zone. For people who want to bring their foreign plated vehicles and stay in those areas, they don't have to get a temporary import permit, and they don't have to pay this deposit, and they don't have to worry about having to drive their car back to the United States after a specific period of time. But for everyone else who wants to live in maybe Ajijic or Puerto Vallarta or any one of these other cities that are not in the free zone, you have to get a temporary import permit. And if you're a tourist, you can drive your car for up to 180 days. If you're a temporary resident, you can drive your foreign plated vehicle for the same duration of your temporary residency. Oh. And for permanent residents, you cannot drive your foreign plated vehicle into Mexico.
So 2 quick questions. Is it about 4 years, which the temporary visa allows you? 4 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most temporary residents are given their temporary residency initially for 1 year, and then you have to renew after the first year. You can renew for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. We recommend just renewing for 3 years. Don't even bother renewing for, a short period of time. Just get it over with. And when you do the renewal, then you can also extend your temporary import permit. So it has to be done in conjunction with your renewal of your temporary residency. After 4 years, if you have a foreign plated vehicle, you have to either import it and get Mexican plates on it, or you have to take it back and drive it out of the country.
At the end of that 4-year period, when you're going from, when you want a permanente after the temporary, does the financial requirement kick in there, or it's just your time in the country, you're good to go, and just, here's your permanent status?
Correct. Yeah. You after 4 years, you would then apply to become a permanent resident without needing to show economic solvency, and it's all done within Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Are they typically approved, or is it difficult?
Yeah, there are some forms involved. You do get a bit of a interview done. So though there's a process done, and you don't just show up to the office and then you're automatically approved. But I haven't had a single client not get approved.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, I mean, that shows, I mean, if you've already been there 4 years, they pretty much know you've settled in the country, and they're probably
And
not.
that's another thing. You're not required to live in Mexico to remain a resident. You're not required to live in Mexico to remain a resident. They just use it as a plan B, or maybe they plan to move to Mexico in 5 or 6 years, but they want to get the residency now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no requirement for you to live in Mexico. So as long as you can show that, as long as you renew your temporary residency before it expires, and if you're a permanent resident, then, it's for life. I mean, it's indefinite. You don't have to ever renew it. You don't have to live in Mexico to remain a permanent resident.
Great. So those people who are applying, but they're still working, they don't have to move within a certain length of time. They don't have to be in Mexico. It's good to know.
Yeah, and so no one questions you. So let me just throw an example, just so I'm really clear, because it's like, wow, that's really good. Because most countries, or not most, but a lot of countries, when you're retiring there, you have to be in the country a minimum of 180 days or 184 days, to get to hit the tax thing, and be part of the tax system and all that sort of stuff. So many of them do that. So in theory, you could. You do the consulates, you get the papers, you got a certain amount of time to go to Mexico. You go to Mexico, you're in there, you're now, here's your temporary, good to go. You stay for 2 weeks, have a nice vacation, and then go home. That's okay?
Yep.
Wow, that's awesome. Wow.
As long as you come back to Mexico
Sure.
to renew your temporary residency.
Right, so if you went there,
And you can renew your temporary residency up to 30 days before it expires, and up to 55 days after it expires.
Oh.
What a great plan B. Wow, you'd be crazy not to do the plan B at this point.
Yeah, that's why I'm telling people, you should really apply sooner than later. You don't have to live in Mexico. There's no requirement for you to live in Mexico. The consulates might tell you that there is a requirement for you to live in Mexico, but they are misinforming you. There is nothing in the Constitution stating that you have to live in Mexico.
Awesome.
You will not lose your residency visa if you don't live in Mexico. It's just a great way to secure your future.
That's huge.
I do want to emphasize, because some people get really bummed out that they might not get permanent residency, and I want to really emphasize the temporary residency is still great.
Mm-hmm.
You have basically all the same benefits of a permanent residency, if not more, by the fact that you're able to bring a foreign plated vehicle for up to 4 years, which is huge for a lot of people.
It is. We know that most Americans retire to Mexico over any other country. Is that true to your
By far.
understanding?
I mean, just based on Google Analytics, right, alone, searches.
And there are so many different environments in the country of Mexico. You can go to the beaches, you can go to the mountains, there's so many choices. And in those choices, you can decide if you like hot weather, or if you want something a little more moderate in a higher elevation like Mexico City, all of those things. So great information that we're sharing today. All of you guys, please write in your comments on this and let us know if there's anything else you'd like to know about it. One thing I'm sure our viewers are interested in is, how is the taxation in Mexico when people are coming in with their income from the US or another country? How does that work?
So Mexico and the United States, for example, have a tax treaty to avoid double taxation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are from the United States and you are working in the United States, maybe you're a digital nomad, maybe you're an entrepreneur, whatever the case, your income comes from the United States. You pay taxes in the United States. You don't pay taxes to Mexico. Unless your income source comes from Mexico. So let's say you become a realtor in Mexico, or you sell timeshares in Mexico, or you rent out your Airbnb as a business in Mexico, So that's when, your income is now coming from a Mexican source, and therefore you should pay taxes in Mexico on that income. But for people who are retired and have Social Security or pensions or brokerage accounts or 401ks and those kinds of things, that is not taxed in Mexico. You don't need to file at all unless you have Mexican income. And even if you do have Mexican income, in 2024, the requirement is that you have to make at least 400,000 pesos before you file for Mexican income, which is roughly $20,000 with today's exchange rate. Most people who are watching your channel probably have passive income, not like active income, and that is not taxed in Mexico.
Before we get into what you actually do and what your company does, MexicoRelocationGuide.com and so forth, I'm gonna put you on the spot, wing off the top of your head, just bounce some cities, but I'm sure people would be curious because I'm curious. A decent, I'm thinking of two old people, retired, in a one-bedroom apartment, but a nice one-bedroom apartment, okay? If you were in Mexico City and let's say you were in La Condesa or Roma or one of the really nice neighborhoods, what do you think that would roughly cost? Typically, you could find
one bedroom?
Yeah, you could find a decent one for
just for the rent?
Yeah, for the rent. Yeah, not to buy, because that could be anything.
For Roma or Condesa, you're looking at least 20,000 pesos, which is about $1,000.
Okay.
In Roma or Condesa. There's a lot of other neighborhoods that are really, really nice that are not Roma and Condesa. For example, like Narvarte, Del Valle, just to name a few.
Yeah.
And you can find rents in those areas at 12,000 pesos, which is around $600 US a month. Mm-hmm. The other really nice thing about Mexico City is that because the weather is so temperate throughout the year, you don't rack up these huge electricity bills for running air conditioning or heating. Mm-hmm. So what you pay for your rental is pretty reflective of what you will pay total. Like a lot of landlords end up including electricity and a variety of other utilities like water and gas, because they're so affordable or accessible that it's not really common to charge the tenant additional.
Mm-hmm. So, and the same question for just bounce a few other cities, like say Puerto Vallarta, Cabo, and something, and in Ajijic. Although our friend said Ajijic, they started with something like they had a really nice casita they were living in for $350, and when they left, that would it was like $1,000 or something. In that 6-year period. So roughly those hits. So Puerto Vallarta, you could find a nice one-bedroom for rent for, what do you think?
Well, Puerto Vallarta is very seasonal too, so that's something to consider, is that during the high season, which is usually November through March, which is when a lot of people from up north come to the warmer climate, rents will usually be a little bit higher, and then during the low season, they usually drop. But it all depends on the neighborhood in Puerto Vallarta. Like, for example, it's not the same thing to rent in Zona Romantica than in like Fluvial or in some other neighborhoods. In Zona Romantica, which is one of the most trendy neighborhoods of all of Puerto Vallarta, you're probably going to find a one-bedroom for no less than 16,000 pesos, which is about $800 with today's exchange rate. I mentioned that I do a lot of surveys with our customers. And I ask them what their cost of living is throughout different cities in Mexico.
Yeah, perfect.
And I do this periodically to get an idea of what are they renting? What are they really spending? Is it really all over the board, or is it kind of in the same ranges throughout all my customers? And the reality is most people are spending about the same regardless of where in Mexico they live for rent. The variances are in things like entertainment and how many people live in their family and those kinds of things. But I have found that and again, I have customers of all ages, some are young families, some of them are retirees that are living as a couple, so there's everything in between. But I have found that for most cities in Mexico, most of my customers, obviously there's exceptions, but most of my customers are spending anywhere between $800 to $1,000 a month on their housing, if they're renting. Where it does vary a lot is on utilities, entertainment, traveling, eating out, what types of groceries they're buying, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. And that's for a 1 bedroom or a 2? What do they typically take?
Usually those are 2 bedrooms.
2s? Yeah, I would fix in case somebody comes and visits kids or whatever, grandkids.
Yeah, or more space. You know, some people want to
Sure.
have just like an extra room
Sure.
to be able to like, you know, take a break from their significant other every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mariana, can you shed a little light on whether it's advisable, easy, difficult for an expat to buy and own property? And then is it also easy for them to sell? And are there capital gains on the property?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's very easy to buy. It's not so easy to sell.
And mortgages are available?
There are a couple of companies that offer mortgages to Canadians and US citizens only. Usually the rates are pretty high. They're in the 6 and 7%. And to qualify, you also have to show that your credit score is pretty high. You usually have to give like a 25% down payment. So there are options for people who don't want to necessarily,
Okay.
So these are international mortgage companies that just happen to help a lot of foreigners moving to Mexico.
Do most people retiring to Mexico open a bank account there?
I have found that most people don't because it's so easy for them to transfer money to themselves in Mexico with, using platforms like Wise and then just setting up a pickup location somewhere in Mexico or Western Union or Exi or Remitly. There's a variety of different apps where you can do this. But if you did want to open a bank account, it's relatively straightforward. There is a lot of paperwork usually involved in it. The banks usually want to really verify that you live in Mexico, that, what is your address, and a lot of bureaucratic processes for you to open a bank account. So, it takes some patience. It's not impossible, but it does take some patience.
And maybe after going through the whole visa process and all the requirements there, people have had enough.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people just decide, I'll do it next year, or I'll do it later.
Right.
I would think it's very beneficial to have a bank account in Mexico. I think it'll help you in many ways. If you have to pay your electricity bill electronically, you will need a Mexican bank account to do that, to be able to buy a lot of things online. So there are a lot of benefits. And then also just being able to access your money basically at any time from basically anywhere and use your Mexican card for those kinds of things.
That's great information about banking.
Yeah.
Do you have another question about banking? Because I'd like to go somewhere else.
Are you leaving? Are you going shopping, or what do you need somewhere else?
I'd like to go to our fur babies. So many of us are beyond the age of having dependent children that would be coming with us to Mexico, but many of us have our pets. What is that like? Can you move to Mexico and bring your pet, or are there certain stipulations?
It's actually pretty easy to bring your pet.
Good.
If you're flying in, the authority that you should really check with on what their requirements are is the airline. Different airlines have different requirements as far as which pets are allowed in cabin, which ones are not, whether there's a limit of how many pets are allowed in cabin or not. Those kinds of things. Only cats and dogs in Mexico, by the way, are considered pets. So, if you're bringing your parakeet, or you're bringing your kid's guinea pig, or, those kinds of animals have a different process than cats and dogs.
Wow, that's a lot of information. We covered a lot of ground here, which has been great. So let's get to something about you now and your company. I'm assuming that you facilitate or help for, certainly the guide would cover virtually everything we've talked about in more minute detail, I would assume. But do you also facilitate doing for people with a lot of these things? Because you kept talking about your clients and things. I'm assuming it's more than the guide in certain areas. So what do you guys actually do? Because I'm sure people are interested and go, well, let me call them and make it easy.
Yeah. Well, that is what we try to do, is make it easy for people, or at least try to help people avoid surprises because they didn't know what they didn't know.
Yeah.
So, the guide was born out of, I feel like, a personal need. Dustin and I, when we started researching, where would we like to retire one day, and kind of like you guys, you know, and I'm sure a lot of people that watch you, you know, at the possibilities of different countries and different landscapes and those kinds of things. You know, we started looking at Spain, we started looking at Portugal, we started looking at Costa Rica, obviously Panama, obviously Mexico. And, you know, looking into Mexico, I realized that there was a lot of really good information online, but there was also a lot of really bad information online. And when I say bad, I don't mean like, you know, the author or the blogger or whoever was posting this information was misleading people, but rather that what some people might not know is that the bureaucracy and a lot of these processes change so much one year to the next, and even in the same year throughout the year. So like I mentioned earlier, Mexico is a land of consistent inconsistencies, and that applies all across the board in the bureaucratic process. And some of the biggest offenders of having poor information are the Mexican government. Like the Mexican government does a really good job of creating, you know, maybe a website and publishing something once. They don't do a great job of updating it with current information, with all the little details that I just told you. They just give you like a basic template of what you need, but they don't tell you all these little nuances. And these are all things that I've just learned in the trade from helping thousands of people. So that's what we do in the guide is, you know, if somebody wanted to have the research done for them, that's where they would find a lot of value in the guide. Can you move to Mexico without buying the online guide? Absolutely. I mean, there's many people who do, and there's many people who do it successfully. Will it save you a lot of time and a lot of like, oh, I wish I would have known that, or oh, like, you know, a lot of headaches? Yeah, it'll save you a lot of time and a lot of headaches.
You'll help people get on the right path, do things in the right order, and from the right country, so to speak, and through the correct embassies, consulates, cities, all of that. That's amazing information that's going to help a lot of people.
And we also give them a directory of contacts. So because I recognize that Mexican bureaucracy is hard to navigate, and the guide is a really good like beginning step, right, to getting you to Mexico the right way and kind of guiding you in the path. But there will be, like, everybody's journey is particular to them, and there's inevitably going to be questions that you might have about your process that are not covered in the guide. So that's where we give people our directory of vetted contacts across Mexico. Everything that I have, my continuous research and all of the information that I know, I'm constantly updating it in the guide. So, you know, if somebody reads it, they will have the same knowledge from me as if they scheduled like a call with me, if that makes sense, or if they wrote me an email, or, you know, I write a lot of details in the online guide. We do also have a private Facebook community that's only for customers. And people do post a lot of clarifying questions that they might not understand from the online guide before they, you know, reach out to one of our vetted contacts. I give people as many tools as possible to empower them to really be able to know what the steps are, not only for residency visas, but also for buying a house, for bringing your pets, for bringing your car, for bringing your household items, for not getting scammed, for, you know, what are the top scams that you should look out for, you know, taxes, healthcare, so many different topics that people need to know about. And then also the directory of contacts in all of these topics throughout Mexico. So it's not only in, like, you know, Los Cabos or Puerto Vallarta. I mean, we have contacts, you know, throughout all the country. So really it doesn't matter if somebody...
Super valuable.
And I understand in your vetted contacts, you give recommendations for tour guides. So although you're not directly connected with the tour guides, you have vetted them, and do they purchase a tour through your company, or do they go directly to the tour guide? And did I understand correctly that it's about $200 to $300 a day, and that would be for a couple?
Correct, yeah.
Great.
So yeah, when you buy the guide, they get instant access to the directory, which includes our private relocation tour guides throughout Mexico in various different cities. I have a page on our website that tells you exactly what cities we have tour guides in. We have a variety of people, usually per city. You would reach out to the one that you want to work with, tell them what you're looking for. Some of them will show you rentals, some of them don't have access to rentals. But I do want to emphasize that it's not a real estate tour, so people don't have to feel afraid of like getting a sales pitch.
Being sold something, yeah.
There's no agenda to sell you anything. Like you pay the tour guide anywhere between $200 to $300 a day for a full day tour for 2 people, and their goal is to show you the different neighborhoods, give you an idea of where to do your shopping, what healthcare options you have, which neighborhoods to avoid, some cost of living examples. It's really like a quick boot camp of, can you see yourself living in that city from a local's perspective, right? That local telling you what it's like for them to live in that city, and you being able to ask that local for their recommendations on that city.
Great.
And without you having to rent a car or drive or figure out where to park or how to get around, or, just being able to sit back and learn.
And I promise this is my last question, but having just left Mexico City and encountering the big demonstration that was going on because of changes in the government, can you shed any light on what the mood is, what changes are occurring, and what people should know about basically the societal understanding and support or lack of support for the government?
Yeah, that is a great question.
Big question.
Yeah, it's a big question. And obviously, this is my perspective. I'm sure other people would have a different perspective. But one thing that is fact is Mexico just inaugurated its first woman president in many years, Claudia Sheinbaum, who is very much a progressive, but I want to say progressive with like a grain of salt, because I know that some people might think progressive, the United States progressive, and in Mexico, progressive is a little bit different. Okay. She is very much for, keeping Mexico's sovereignty and keeping Mexico in the forefront as an economic leader and opening it up to, I don't know if you've heard that Mexico is, really becoming a powerhouse with this nearshoring because of, the NAFTA agreement that was signed years ago. And so a lot of companies are bringing their operations to Mexico to take advantage of not having to pay the same taxes or, commerce taxes as if they would coming from their home country. There's also a big project happening in Mexico called El Istmo, and that is a small canal and a small railway that would connect, one ocean to the other, kind of like the Panama Canal.
Yeah, down in the south. Yeah, we saw that.
Yeah, so that would be a huge economic benefit to the country of Mexico, because it obviously, like the Panama Canal, we know that, that really brought in a lot of revenue for the country. There's dozens and dozens of international airports. There's a lot of public transportation, excellent medical facilities. A lot of doctors have actually completed their studies in the United States or in parts of Europe. Mexico is very familiar to a lot of people from the United States, and not to mention that there's also a lot of things like Costco and Sam's and HEB and like Walmart and, even some companies from Canada, like Tim Hortons, opening up in various parts of Mexico.
Are Amazon orders, deliveries easy to get in Mexico, in, I guess, major cities?
You mean like through Amazon and things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Amazon warehouses in various parts of Mexico. So, some people do get 2-day delivery. And, and yeah, getting deliveries is not hard. As long as you have an address, so you're assuming you're not living in like a very rural area. I don't know if you're asking about Mexicans or if you're asking about foreigners living in Mexico.
I think I'm asking about Mexicans because that would set the tone for the country, wouldn't it? Yeah.
And you try to assimilate in, you'd want to assimilate
Right.
into the society.
We always encourage.
What roughly are you encountering? I think that's where you're going, isn't it?
Sort of the mood.
Yeah.
I would say that the mood right now of a lot of Mexicans is very hopeful. Just to give you an idea and like a statistical fact, because I can't speak for all the people of Mexico, but the current president has an approval rating of like 75% in her first
Wow.
90 days of the presidency. So a lot of people are really behind her, and I think she's doing an excellent job. I know she gets a lot of heat because she's grandfathered a lot of the problems from before. And until she can really prove herself, she will probably have to, carry that weight. But I think she's doing a really good job, along with her cabinet, at trying to really control this cartel violence. And we're seeing it left and right. I mean, there's a reason why there's so much activity right now in Colima and Sinaloa, because there is a lot of government presence, or they really are putting away a lot of people, and they're really cutting a lot of the heads of this terrible organization, right? Or these terrible organizations. She's doing a really good job at putting the people in place that are really going to help combat this. And I think a lot of people are seeing that. And I feel, just in speaking with friends and family and maybe even some of the contacts that we recommend, and just a variety of different Mexicans, I feel that people are really hopeful. And they also see Mexico becoming a huge economic powerhouse, so they're excited about the future of what Mexico can be in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So I feel like there's a lot of hope.
Yeah, it's a lot of hope, yeah.
That's wonderful. That's a great mood for the country overall, and that spreads, right?
So if you want to be part of that future of Mexico and maybe retire there and enjoy it, I suggest that you contact Mariana Lang, and you can certainly do that by just going to MexicoRelocationGuide.com. Everything that we've ever talked about is sitting on there.
And we'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, and Mariana is graciously going to give you 10% if you do what's on the screen right now, Laptop Seniors. That's going to be the code for 10% off. Certainly, we found the Panama Relocation Guide infinitely helpful for our journey through Panama. So thank you for being with us. This was great.
Thank you, Mariana. You've been wonderful and given so much information to our viewers and to us today. We really appreciate that. I hope we'll stay in touch, and maybe you could let us know if there are any major updates, and maybe we'll do this again.
Absolutely. I want to thank you both for allowing me to share this space with your audience. And obviously, I'm honored that you even thought of me to share the moving to Mexico insights. I know it's a lot of information, but I guarantee you that we really do try to make it a lot easier on people so that they don't feel so overwhelmed, because moving to another country is already overwhelming in itself. So we try to make the bureaucratic process seem a lot easier.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen on your website, everything's laid out very clearly there for people to get their start. And so, thank you so much. And
you want to close that baby out?
Yes, I will. We sure appreciate all of you watching our videos and coming back time after time. Thank you, and please come back and see us again soon. Bye for now. Ooh.